Dr. Leora Venn stood beneath the rusted skeletal canopy of the Atacama Observatory. The structure was a monument to abandoned inquiry, high above the bone-dry valley floor, where the atmosphere was so thin and pure it felt like standing at the edge of space itself. Tonight, the air was cold, sharp, and entirely free of humanity's smog. Above her, the cosmos was a terrifyingly brilliant spectacle. Her eyes weren't fixed on the nearest planet or nebula. They were tracing the slow, majestic drift of stars across the desert night. The Milky Way, a colossal, ancient scar, stretched across the zenith like an open wound of light. Its core, a churning vortex of dust and suns, pointed, tonight, directly toward Earth's southern hemisphere. For the past decade, Leora had lived a solitary life, dedicated not to finding new stars, but to understanding the silence left by old civilizations. She was an astronomical archaeologist, a field she had essentially invented. Where most historians studied broken pottery and foundational stones, Leora studied celestial alignments recorded in deep-time astronomical data, looking for synchronous events. Her laboratory wasn't filled with spades and brushes, but with sophisticated magnetic sensors and ancient star charts pulled from every corner of the globe. The ruins are the consequence, not the cause, she often argued to her empty office. The key isn't why they abandoned the city, but what happened to the sky when they did. She had constructed a meticulous, controversial database of catastrophic historical events overlaid with precise astronomical data points. The resulting patterns were too consistent to ignore. The inexplicable and swift disappearance of the Mayan classical cities around 900 AD, the sudden, widespread decline and eventual abandonment of the Indus Valley civilization over centuries linked to climate change, the eerie, almost instantaneous silence of the Olmecs and the destruction of their major centers. Each, Leora found, had occurred during a precise, recurring astronomical event, a cosmic cycle where the Sun, the Earth, and a massive electromagnetically active region of deep space, an area she identified as the Sagittarius cluster near the galactic center, fell into a rare three-body alignment. She didn't believe the distant stars caused the destruction directly. She believed the combined gravitational and energetic flux of the alignment acted as a cosmic trigger. She called it the Stellar Reset Hypothesis. Her unpublished treatise, a manuscript so radical that it had been returned by every major academic journal with polite, terrified notes, contained its defining thesis. Civilizations don't fall by chance. They collapse when the sky itself resets the code.
The dust in the old library was a living thing, a fine, glittering silt that coated every forgotten volume and swirled in the single shaft of late afternoon sun cutting through the arched window. Dr. Aris Thorne, a historian whose tweed jacket and perpetual air of distraction belied a razor-sharp intellect, inhaled the scent, a potent mix of aged paper, leather, and something metallic, like ancient rust. He was not looking for a lost king's tomb or a priceless jewel. Aris was after something far more elusive, knowledge. Specifically, the persistent, nagging anomalies in the history of human achievement, the Greek Antikythera mechanism, the perfectly straight Nazca lines, the uncanny global accuracy of the Piri-Reis map, all whispers of a sophistication that shouldn't exist in their time frames. His quest had led him here, to the undisclosed private library of the late philanthropist and eccentric historian Lord Alastair Finch. For 6 months, Aris had been sifting through Finch's archives, a labyrinth of rare books and dubious artifacts. He ran a gloved hand along a shelf dedicated not to nations or dates, but to concepts, lost sciences, undecipherable glyphs, pre-Diluvian cartography. It was on this shelf, wedged between a 17th century treatise on alchemy and a volume on Sumerian celestial charts, that he found it. It wasn't a book. It was a long, narrow, dark wooden box, entirely unlabeled, about the length of a human forearm. Its surface was carved with a pattern that seemed to shift in the weak light, a dense lattice of interlocking shapes that were instantly and profoundly familiar to Aris. They were the same subtle, recurrent geometric symbols he had catalogued from disparate sites: a cave painting in the Sahara, a ceramic shard from the Indus Valley, and a barely visible etching on a foundation stone in an Aztec ruin. "The Phoenix knot," he whispered, recognizing the impossible complexity of the design. Modern cryptography suggested the pattern held an encryption key so advanced it could theoretically store centuries of data in a space no larger than a coin. The box had no lock or hinge. He tried pushing, pulling, and tapping, but the wood remained seamless. Aris sighed, placing it on a heavy mahogany desk already covered with research notes. Frustration was a familiar companion. "Found something, Doctor?" The voice made Aris jump. Leora Venn, Lord Finch's great-niece and the curator of the archive, stood silently in the doorway. She was an archaeologist who favored practical field gear over traditional library attire, and her sharp, skeptical gaze rarely missed a detail. "Dr. Vance, just an interesting container." Aris gestured to the box. "The carving, it incorporates a recurring complex symbol, a composite I call the Phoenix knot. It appears to be a locking mechanism." Leora stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied the pattern. "Finch called those the glyphs of Tiran, said they were the core language of what he termed the source. He believed all ancient advanced knowledge stemmed from a single pre-Ice Age civilization which communicated through these symbols." Aris looked up, surprised. He documented this? In his own Codex Mortis, his private journal, he claimed the key wasn't physical, but linguistic, a name, a phrase, translated into that ancient geometry. Leora pointed to a small obsidian stone on Aris's notepad. He had found it tucked inside the Sumerian chart book. It was a smooth, dark stone, no bigger than a thumb, but with a tiny, precise triangular indentation on its flat base. "And this?" Aris asked, picking it up. "I thought it was just a worry stone."
"That's the obsidian key. Finch found it in a tomb in Sardinia. He never figured out its purpose, but he was convinced it was part of his Tiran mystery." Aris stared at the box, then at the obsidian key. The box had a minute, barely visible depression on one end, a perfect fit for the key's base. Slowly, he inserted the stone. It sank in with a nearly inaudible click. The box didn't open. Instead, the carved lattice of the Phoenix knot began to glow with a faint pale blue phosphorescence. It was then that Aris and Leora realized the carving was not just decoration, it was a circuit board. As the light pulsed, a single, deep, resonant hum filled the room, vibrating in their chests. The light concentrated at the center of the box, and a section of the wood, no thicker than parchment, slid inward with a soft, mechanical sigh. Inside, resting on a bed of finely woven silver-like material, was a scroll. It was not made of paper or papyrus, but of a substance that shimmered like polished copper and felt smooth and cold to the touch. This was the secret codex of the ancients. Aris gently unrolled the scroll onto the desk. It was impossibly thin, yet held the weight of millennia. The surface was filled with 3 distinct elements laid out in meticulous, complex layers. The hidden symbols, the Tiron glyphs, thousands of the interlocking geometric knots clearly forming a cohesive, repeating language but utterly alien to any known script. The advanced languages, the annotations. Interspersed among the glyphs were smaller, meticulous annotations written in 3 scripts Aris knew well: Linear A, Indus script, and Etruscan, all of which remain largely or completely undeciphered by modern linguistics, as if the unknown language was being translated by 3 different historical civilizations. The impossible maps, the cartography. Most strikingly, the bottom half of the scroll displayed a highly detailed, interwoven series of maps. One section depicted the Earth's landmasses, but not as they are now. It showed coastlines before the last ice age, with land bridges and submerged continents, accurate to geological models Aris knew were only derived from modern satellite bathymetry. Another section contained an unbelievably precise stellar chart, marking the movement of a binary star system unknown to 21st century astronomy. "It's all here," Leora breathed, stepping closer, her earlier skepticism dissolving into awe. The entire framework. Finch was right. The 3 languages aren't just annotations, they're 3 different keys to decoding the Tiron glyphs. Aris's mind was racing, connecting decades of scattered research. The Tiron glyphs are the source code. Linear A, Indus, and Etruscan, they must represent 3 regional dialects of a global attempt to interpret or preserve that source code. We can't crack any of them individually, but if we treat them as a 3-point cipher. He tapped a precise point on the map where the coast of a sunken continent was drawn with crystalline detail. Look at this cartography. This level of detail requires orbital viewing. And if this stellar chart is accurate, it describes a gravitational anomaly, a planetary body whose existence we haven't confirmed yet. The codex was not merely a record of an older civilization. It was a manual, a scientific journal, and a history book combined, offering the ultimate proof that advanced knowledge predates modern times. It spoke of an era when humanity not only navigated the globe with precision, but also tracked star systems and understood geology on a cosmic scale. But as they studied the map section, a sudden chill ran down Aris's spine. He pointed to a small, recurring symbol overlaid onto the cartography, a stylized eye, ringed by 7 dots. It was a familiar symbol from the history of secret societies. "What is that?" Leora asked, noticing the change in his voice. "That symbol," Aris said, his voice low. "It's in every occult text, every fringe group conspiracy theory. It's the emblem of the Aethelwolf Order, a shadowy group rumored to have guarded and exploited ancient knowledge for centuries. Finch always dismissed them as nonsense." He traced the symbol. On the map, it was strategically placed over specific locations: a deep-sea trench in the Pacific, a remote peak in the Himalayas, and a recently excavated off-limits site in Antarctica. They didn't just guard the knowledge, Leora. They claim it. And if this codex is right, these 3 points are not just geographic locations, they're coordinates. Leora looked up, her expression grim. Coordinates for what? Aris took a shaky breath, the metallic scent of the library suddenly feeling sharper, more ominous. For what the original civilization left behind, the places where they hid their power, their technology, and their history. And the Aethelwolf Order seems to know precisely where they are.
"Data sent, Jonas. Get out of there. I'll meet you at the secondary extraction point. Tell no one," she hissed into the comm, before smashing the device on the stone floor. The drone passed, its humming fading. Leora, clutching a memory stick containing the digital record of the 12,600-year-old warning, began her desperate climb out of the buried temple. Act 3. the forbidden sky. They called themselves the Planetary and Cosmological Research Agency, but everyone inside the specialized scientific community whispered the truth. The Orion Division wasn't studying the cosmos, they were guarding it. They had unlimited funding, deep access to military technology, and one primary goal: maintaining the global ignorance regarding the cosmic cycles. Leora and Jonas barely escaped Peru, traversing 3 borders via a network of trusted, old-school scientific contacts, smuggling the carved symbols in highly encrypted holographic files hidden within ordinary digital frames. They found refuge in a small, isolated lab near Santiago, Chile, hidden beneath the decommissioned dome of a retired, pre-digital era observatory. It was a perfect sanctuary, analog, off-grid, and invisible to Orion's digital dragnet. There, in the faint green glow of cathode ray tube monitors, they began the arduous task of decoding the symbols. "The spiral isn't an artistic rendering of the galaxy," Leora announced one evening, leaning over the enlarged image of the Tiamarca carving. She had been mapping the angular values of the 8 rays against contemporary geophysical models. "It's a vector map," Jonas realized, tracing the lines on the screen. Each ray points not to a star, but to a specific electromagnetic field vector, a node of magnetic field weakness. Leora nodded, her eyes blazing with the clarity of a breakthrough. Precisely. The ancient civilization understood the mechanism. The alignment of the Sun and Sagittarius doesn't just increase gravitational flux. It creates a massive, focused wave of cosmic radiation that destabilizes the Earth's geodynamo, the molten iron core that generates our magnetic shield. She pulled up a 3D simulation of Earth's magnetic field. She marked the 8 vector points predicted by the ancient carving. They perfectly correlated with modern seismic and deep core sensor data on the 8 major magnetic inversion points, areas where the polarity of the field was weakest. "The next alignment," Leora whispered, her voice barely audible, "isn't going to cause earthquakes or solar flares. It's going to trigger a geomagnetic reversal." Jonas leaned back in his chair, the implications flooding his face with disbelief and terror. "The pole flip. The North Pole becomes the South Pole." "Not just a slow drift, Jonas," Leora corrected, tapping the screen. "A catastrophic, rapid collapse and chaotic reformation. For a period of possibly months, the Earth's magnetic shield will drop to near zero. And every time it happens," Jonas finished the thought, his voice hollow, "civilizations collapse." Leora nodded slowly. "Because our entire infrastructure, our global memory, our high-speed electronics, our fundamental navigation, even the protection of our DNA from cosmic rays, it all depends on the stability of that field. When the field flips, so does everything we know." The stellar reset was not an act of divine judgment. It was a simple, brutal law of physics, governed by the geometry of the solar system and the galaxy. Project Nova.
At that precise moment, a high-frequency encrypted transmission punched through their dedicated closed-loop network. It was not a trace, it was a targeted transmission. The source signature was enigmatic: Project Nova. Leora quickly initiated a trace, but it was impossible. The signal bounced through too many military-grade satellites. A synthesized voice, cold and devoid of inflection, cut through the static.
"Dr. Venn, you were never meant to find the equation. The cycle protects itself. Abandon your work. End the broadcast." The line went dead, leaving only the sterile hum of their equipment. The message was a clear confirmation. The Orion Division wasn't just guarding the secret. They were actively involved in managing the collapse. They knew the equation, and they wanted it
buried. Leora stared at the monitor, her face hardening from fear to resolve. They're not trying to stop it, Jonas. They're trying to control the narrative during and after the event. Before either of them could react, a sudden, blinding crimson light flared outside the observatory window. Jonas rushed to the dome. Look! Outside, across the black southern sky, a brilliant red aurora began to shimmer, pulsing like an arterial wound. It was thousands of miles from where such a phenomenon should ever appear, a display usually reserved for the high polar regions. This was the first undeniable sign of the geomagnetic field beginning to fray, leaking cosmic plasma into the upper atmosphere at mid-latitudes. The forbidden sky had opened. The countdown was accelerating. Act 4. The Last Alignment. By late 2026, the magnetic anomalies were no longer confined to the polar regions or hidden deep beneath the Earth. They were everywhere. Compasses across the globe spun wildly, useless. Migratory birds were observed flying in dizzying, fatal circles over major cities. The financial markets, the ultimate expression of the old world, began to suffer massive, untraceable errors as data centers and high-frequency trading servers experienced increasing digital corruption. Satellites blinked out of orbit, not from debris, but from atmospheric drag caused by the expanding, destabilized upper atmosphere and increased radiation.
Governments denied everything, issuing bland statements about solar weather and minor grid maintenance. The Orion Division, having neutralized Leora's field lab, went entirely silent. Their personnel pulled into deep, undisclosed bunkers. Leora and Jonas, knowing they had run out of time for academic debate, transitioned from researchers to broadcasters. They began transmitting her entire collected research, the orbital mechanics, the Teomarca carvings, the electromagnetic vector maps, and the 2027 collapse date, globally through underground decentralized networks, torrents, and amateur radio frequencies. Her purpose wasn't to cause panic, which she knew was inevitable, but to prepare humanity for the aftermath. She didn't offer a technological fix. She offered a cognitive map for survival. She called it the Cosmic Renewal Protocol. It was a simple 5-point plan. Abandon digital archives, memorize crucial technological and agricultural instructions, build Faraday cages for essential tools, prioritize community and manual skills, and remember the stars. Her final broadcasted message, repeated across every available band, was a defiant acceptance of the cycle. We cannot stop the cycle. The universe is indifferent to our existence, but we can remember through it. When the lights go out, look up. The story of our collapse is written in the sky. Learn it, and ensure the next civilization starts with wisdom, not blind technological arrogance. The day the clock stopped. On the night of January 14th, 2027, the alignment began. Leora stood on the roof of their hidden lab, the air humming not with electricity, but with a deep, subsonic resonance that felt like a vibration in the crust of the Earth. In the sky, the planets, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, curved into a perfect, massive arc across the black velvet. They were not merely visible, they felt close, their combined gravitational pull acting as the final key in the cosmic lock. As the Sagittarius cluster reached its predicted zenith, the Earth's surface began to visibly shimmer. Light danced over oceans and metallic surfaces like a silver tide. It was the electromagnetic field undergoing its chaotic, violent breakdown. In the lab, the magnetometers did not just spike.
Their needles violently wrapped themselves around the physical stops of the gauge, tearing themselves apart, off scale, maxed out, and destroyed. Leora did not flinch. She smiled faintly, a profound serenity settling over her face. She was not dying. She was witnessing the truth. "It's beautiful," she whispered into the thin, charged air, her voice lost to the universe itself. Then, silence. Not the silence of the desert, but the total, unnerving, complete absence of electrical energy. The hum of the atmosphere ceased. The faint, high-pitched whine of the globe's interconnected digital network gone. The lights of the distant city, which were visible as a hazy glow on the horizon, extinguished in a single, simultaneous breath. Hours later, as the dawn bled a fragile gold light into the eastern sky, the world awoke. Power grids were lifeless. Satellites had rained down or become silent, orbital scrap. Every server farm, every laptop, every smartphone, every digital archive, their data corrupted, their digital memory erased by the intense magnetic wash and radiation burst that had filtered through the collapsing shield. But people survived. They came out of their cities, out of their darkened homes, into a clear, stunning dawn. They looked up and saw the stars unfiltered for the first time in centuries, without the glowing blanket of light pollution. Children laughed, pointing at the strange, shimmering green and red lights of the permanent, global aurora in the new sky. They were cold, they were hungry, and they had lost. The year is 227 ASC, after stellar collapse. 200 years had passed since the Great Reset of 2027. The global population was stable, housed in decentralized settlements known as the Sunstone Communities. Technology was robust, analog, and relied primarily on mechanical, hydro, and wind power. Digital memory was non-existent, replaced by extensive libraries of hand-copied texts and intricate memory protocols. In a settlement nestled high in the Chilean Andes, built around the foundations of the old Santiago Observatory, lived Ari Venn. At 25, she possessed the characteristic intensity and deep questioning eyes of her ancestor, Dr. Leora Venn. Ari was not just an astronomer, she was a stellar archivist, one of the privileged few entrusted with maintaining the ancestral knowledge passed down through the Venn Protocol, the oral tradition of survival that began 2 centuries earlier. The air in the Yandean settlement was thin, pure, and smelled of wood smoke and polished brass. Ari spent her days inside the massive, manually operated dome of the observatory, tracking the cycles of the planets and the distant, crucial signature of the Sagittarius cluster through a massive, non-electronic refracting telescope. The whisper in the wreckage. Ari's current obsession was not the sky, but the earth. The ruins of the old world, the silent metallic skeletons of skyscrapers and highways were treated with reverence and caution, known locally as the Monuments of Arrogance. One blistering afternoon, Arin and her colleague Kai navigated the twisted remains of a coastal military research bunker that had been swallowed by the desert. Kai was an expert in the meticulous craft of analog salvage and mechanics, a master of gears, clockwork, and copper wire. The field reports show increased solar activity, Kai grunted, adjusting the hand-cranked atmospheric filter on his mask. We should be watching the sun, Ari, not scavenging the old world's ghosts. The ghosts hold the key to the next orbit, Kai, Ari replied, her attention focused on a deep crevice in the concrete foundation. The Venn Protocol taught them that Dr. Leora Venn had hidden her final crucial data in a Faraday cage, a metallic box designed to shield electronics from the electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, that had erased the world's memory. If the data existed, it would be here, in a high-security bunker. After hours of painstaking work, using a pulley and lever system of Kai's design, they exposed a buried subchamber. Inside, tucked into a thick lead casing, Ari found it, a small, sealed box made of layered copper mesh and iron. Inside the box lay the treasure, 3 magnetic data discs and a thick, hand-bound journal. The discs were meaningless without the original sophisticated readers, but the journal, written in a clear, urgent hand, was instantly legible. It was Dr. Leora Venn's final scientific diary and personal memoir. Ari read the first lines. January 15, 2027. The world is silent. My life's work is erased, but my purpose remains. The cycle is not a random cosmic punishment. It is a planetary purification protocol. It is the Earth's immune response to unsustainable complexity. The reset saved the biosphere from our technology, but the cycle is not finished. It has 2 phases, and the second is a test of memory. Ari's hands trembled. Her ancestor had not just predicted the end, she had understood its purpose. The collapse was phase 1. Phase 2 was the rise of the new civilization, and the threat of the cycle recurring was a test to see if humanity would repeat its digital folly. The double helix of the cosmos. Over the next weeks, Ari and Kai worked tirelessly. Kai successfully reverse-engineered an analog reader capable of interpreting the crude magnetic signature on the disks. The data revealed Leora's original unpublished equations. It wasn't just BZ flux, it was a complex interaction model. This fundamental equation of electromagnetism was overlaid with a new complex variable that Leora called psi, the Sagittarius flux coefficient. More unsettling than the physics was the personal memoir. Leora's final entry spoke of the Orion Division not merely as a government agency, but as a group who had voluntarily chosen to survive the reset with their high technology intact. They know the equation, Leora had written. They are not guarding the cosmos, they are selecting the inheritors of the next world. They believe themselves to be the children of light, destined to rule the analog survivors with their preserved digital superiority. Ari realized the truth. The reset was not the end of the struggle. It was the birth of the true enemy. Act 2. The Shadow of the Orion Division.
The Renewal Society, as the descendants of the Orion Division now called themselves, had spent 2 centuries in deep, magnetically shielded bunkers, preserving their digital archives and their technological capability. They believed the analog world was a fleeting evolutionary mistake. Their leader, a cold, meticulous man known only as Director Vega, viewed Ari's civilization as primitive and stagnant. They survive on hand tools and legends, Vega stated to his council, watching grainy satellite footage of the Sunstone communities. But progress is a mandate of the cosmos. The reset was a temporary setback. We must fulfill the promise of our ancestors and restore digital order. The anomaly broadcast. The first sign of the Renewal Society's activity was an anomaly that baffled the Stellar Archivists. It was not a cosmic event, but a deep-core terrestrial disturbance. One night, while monitoring seismic activity around the ancient Tiamarca region in Peru, Ari's simple pendulum-based seismograph began recording a strange, rhythmic pulse. It wasn't an earthquake signature. "It's a manufactured frequency, Ari. Too perfect, too regular. It's coming from an ancient deep Earth location, maybe one of the original Orion bunkers." Using a repurposed directional radio telescope built from scrap copper and mirrors, Ari locked on to the source. She decoded the signal using Leora's old cipher keys. It wasn't a warning. It was a reverse countdown, a highly complex, modulated pulse aimed directly at the Tiamarca alignment point. "It's not intended to warn us, Kai. It's intended to accelerate the cycle. If they can manipulate the terrestrial magnetic field early, they can destabilize our analog infrastructure and force the resets phase 2 to occur on their terms." The Renewal Society was trying to trigger an early, chaotic magnetic shift, a mini reset that would wipe out the slow analog progress of the Sunstone communities, leaving the digitally prepared Renewal Society as the unquestioned inheritors. Hunted by the past. Ari knew she had to move. Leora's journal contained detailed maps showing a specific secondary, deeper chamber beneath the Tiamarca temple, labeled the Key. She and Kai traveled north under cover of darkness, relying on solar-powered carts and ancient hidden footpaths. But the Renewal Society was already tracking them. Director Vega had reactivated the Orion Division's most effective surveillance tool, a small solar-sailed drone, silent and virtually invisible against the night sky, their sensors preserved in cryovaults. One evening, while resting near a high mountain pass, the drone threat materialized. A sudden, silent shimmer of polished metal appeared overhead.
"They found the old maps," Kai cursed, grabbing his bag of specialized tools. "They know we have the Venn legacy." They were forced to abandon their vehicle and scrambled down a sheer rock face. As they descended, a beam of high-powered focused light, too clean and intense for any natural source, swept the area. It was an unmanned search drone, its single red eye blinking like the false star Leora had seen 2 centuries ago. They escaped narrowly, hiding in a cave that had once served as an ancient mining shaft. The immediate danger was past, but the lesson was brutally clear. The Renewal Society was not a legend. They were a technologically superior enemy, and they knew the stakes of the stellar reset better than anyone. They were willing to sacrifice the world again for control. Act 3. The Ancient Mechanism. The Tiamarca Temple was exactly as Leora's journal described, except now it was partially excavated by the Renewal Society. Massive crude boreholes scarred the ground, evidence of Director Vega's search for the key. Ari and Kai slipped past the makeshift perimeter. Using the precise measurements from Leora's notes and Kai's custom-built gravity sensor, they located the true hidden entrance, a perfectly concealed stone panel behind the original carving wall. The mechanism of balance. The chamber they entered was far deeper and more structurally sound than the first. It was not a worship site. It was a factory, built with colossal stones and precise engineering. At the center stood the ancient mechanism. It was a towering, non-ferrous bronze device, easily 20 feet high, constructed of intricate interlocking rings and massive polished quartz crystals. It was entirely mechanical. No wiring, no digital components, but powered by the slow, immense energy of geothermal heat channeled through the stone. "It's not an energy source," Ari whispered, walking around the silent giant. Leora's journal provided the answer. The ancient civilization did not stop the reset. They modified it. This mechanism is designed to interface with the Earth's core frequency. It doesn't prevent the flip, but it regulates the rate of collapse. It smooths the transition, preventing the chaotic, memory-destroying pulse that occurs when the field fails violently. The ancient mechanism was a governor on the cycle, a tool used 12,600 years ago to allow a civilization to transition, to save its essential knowledge without resorting to the destructive reset phase, I.
If activated improperly, it would still fulfill the Renewal Society's plan, a chaotic, field-destroying mini-reset. But if tuned correctly, it could stabilize the magnetic field and prevent the immediate, widespread technological destruction. The double trap. As Ari began to examine the mechanism's control panel, a complex arrangement of heavy levers and calibrated stone weights, a harsh, synthesized voice echoed through the chamber. A predictable move, Archivist Venn. The hubris of the ancestor leads the descendant to the same trap. Director Vega stood at the entrance, flanked by 4 guards wearing lightweight, power-assisted armor. They carried energy weapons, a technology unseen since the reset. The cycle is a gift, not a curse, Vega, Ari stated, stepping in front of the ancient mechanism. It is a privilege, Vega corrected, his voice resonating with cold authority. And only we are worthy of it. Your analog world is a beautiful museum, but it is not evolution. We have waited 2 centuries to restart the true progress. The mechanism allows us to bypass the slow, messy reset and simply initiate a digital reboot of the globe. Vega explained their plan. They would overload the mechanism, causing a localized, focused magnetic pulse that would wipe out the remaining analog memory and the fragile power grids of the Sunstone communities. Simultaneously, they would emerge from their bunkers, claiming to be the only survivors with working technology, ready to install their digital regime. The Renewal Society was here not just to find the mechanism, but to activate it. Act 4. Facing the Echo. The air in the chamber crackled with tension. Kai, sensing the impending confrontation, slowly reached into his tool bag, not for a weapon, but for a length of finely tuned copper wire and a handful of magnetized ceramic bearings.
"Give the discs, Archivist," Vega commanded, raising his energy weapon. "The knowledge belongs to those who can wield power." "It belongs to those who can remember," Ari retorted. "My ancestor understood that true survival isn't about saving technology. It's about preserving humanity's core memory. That's why the mechanism exists. The ultimate analog hack." The guards surged forward. Kai acted instantly, not engaging the soldiers, but targeting the ancient mechanism. He threw the magnetized ceramic bearings at a series of massive, spinning bronze gears built into the mechanism's base. The gears, designed to interface with the Earth's core, were never meant to handle a sudden, localized magnetic field. The mechanism shuddered violently. A high-pitched, resonant whine filled the air. "Stop him!" Vega roared, realizing the threat to his critical timing. As the guards chased Kai, Ari sprinted towards the control panel. She didn't try to stop the device. She couldn't. She had to retune it. She recalled the most crucial entry from Leora's diary, the Phase 2 stabilization frequency, a precise, hand-calculated calibration required to prevent the chaotic pulse. The Renewal Society was preparing to push the main lever to position 7, immediate collapse. Ari, ignoring the energy blasts impacting the stone around her, threw her entire weight onto the central tuning crank, attempting to force it toward position 3, stabilized transition. The mechanism was fighting her, resisting the analog adjustment with the force of 2 centuries of inertia. The digital failsafe. As the 2 forces wrestled, Ari, with her physical strength and inherited knowledge, against the Renewal Society's brute force technology, Kai shouted, "Ari, I can't hold the gears! It's going to hit maximum output!" Ari realized she couldn't outmuscle the mechanism. She needed to hit the one thing the Renewal Society believed was their ultimate shield, their preserved technology. She ripped the main lever past Position 7, directly into the emergency bypass, Position 0. The chamber went silent. The resonant hum stopped. For a moment, Vega looked victorious. "Fool, you've only stopped it." But Ari had not stopped it. She had activated the failsafe. She grabbed the Venn discs from her pack and slammed them into the mechanism's center spindle. The ancient mechanism responded. It drew upon the immense geothermal energy, and using Leora's recorded data as a template, did not emit a destructive pulse, but a massive, precise counter-frequency wave. This was the solution. The wave was specifically tuned to disrupt the high-frequency, sensitive electronics preserved in the Renewal Society's bunkers and their power-assisted armor. A wave of harmless, localized energy washed through the chamber. The armor of Vega's guards immediately powered down, their sophisticated energy weapons going dead. Vega staggered, suddenly facing a physical human threat with only his analog sidearm. He fired, but Kai was faster, bringing a heavy, ancient brass lamp crashing down on the mechanism's center crystal, shattering it, and finally ending the power surge. The Renewal Society, stripped of their technological advantage, were quickly subdued by the local security forces who had been tracking Ari and Kai. The new path. The crisis was averted. The cycle did not reset early. The Earth's magnetic field, though still inverted, remained stable thanks to the controlled analog disruption. Ari stood before the Sunstone communities days later, holding the broken pieces of the mechanism's center crystal. The cycle is not a destroyer. It is a lesson. The Renewal Society failed because they loved the technology more than humanity itself. We will not repeat the digital folly of the ancestors. Ari's research was not erased this time. The analog copies of Leora's diary became the foundation of the New World's curriculum. The civilization chose to remain on the new path, a life of sustainable, understandable technology, rejecting the complexities that had led to the Great Collapse. Epilogue. 50 years later. The world thrived. The Sunstone communities expanded, connected by efficient rail-based transport systems and relying on advanced mechanical computing. They had faced the echo of their past and won. Ari Venn, now an elderly, revered figure, sat under the massive dome of the observatory. She watched her student, a young woman named Nova, working meticulously with the handcrafted star charts. The Sagittarius cluster was once again drifting toward the critical alignment point. The real Phase 2 was still generations away, but they were ready. Nova looked up, her face illuminated by the light of the stars. "Grand Archivist, why did the ancient people need the ancient mechanism? Why couldn't they just live like us?" Ari smiled, a deep wisdom in her eyes. "Because they hadn't learned to value the simple things, Nova. The mechanism allowed them a second chance, but it was our choices that secured the future." She reached out and pointed to the core of the Milky Way, where the Sagittarius cluster shone. "The stars always align, but now we remember to look at them with curiosity, not fear. We have chosen the new orbit." And in the silence of the night, the vast, stable universe held its peace. Humanity finally had learned to live in balance with the cosmos.